So continuing where I got cut off, but yeah, Alex, you know, I would ask those hard questions that are uncomfortable to people. I mean, unless there's some ulterior motive, you have a reason not to ask those questions. But you're super smart guy. I mean, I'm sure you're, you know, way above the typical genius in a lot of ways, intellectually speaking. I mean, you have a lot of knowledge of history and a well-rounded knowledge of a lot of things. And your specialty is information, and you offer society a very important function, very valuable function, being the cutting-edge educators at InfoWars, informers, okay? So informing us correctly, but if you're not going to ask the questions that you know are important, I mean, let's talk about this $50 billion a year subsidy, this welfare program for housing that's supposed to prevent housing. I mean, talk about this. Bring this up in your discussions about socialism. And so where is this money going to? It's going in the pockets of guys like Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, okay? Understand that housing prices around the country would plummet overnight. That includes rents, because there's a direct correlation between the cost of rent and housing. If they got rid of that Section 8 housing program overnight, okay? Right now, the problem with even feeding this monster, $50 billion a year, the problems have been getting worse. Homelessness has been increasing. And Section 8 is all about housing those that can't afford housing. Do you understand what I'm... So why this makes me crazy, why I think this is such a pertinent, relevant, important, critical issue that people discuss? Because you're always saying, oh, we got to cut taxes / social welfare spending. Dude, it's going in the pockets of Rich Dad. The guy you had on the show, you could have called him on this. You know, even he brought up. And I commend Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad. I commend him for bringing up the '08 bailout, how he was against it. Good for him. And so we're 90% of the American people, 90% of the American people whom I would trust to run the Federal Reserve. But we've got to have this discourse, this dialogue, this conversation has to be had. Okay, we got to talk about what would have happened in '08 if 90% of the American people had gotten their way. Okay, you would have seen a market correction. That is capitalism at work. When people act recklessly with lending and this sort of thing, and they did it by deliberation so they could steal people's houses in these foreclosures, I know what was going on the whole time. And it made me nuts that other people weren't getting it. They didn't understand this was on purpose. This wasn't incompetence or stupidity. This was totally planned by deliberation, by scheme, by craft. This is how they did it. So, you know, let's get honest. Let's get real. You want to fix problems or don't you? You've got to talk about these things with the communists that you claim are so horrible. And, you know, but can you at least give them credit for believing what they believe and having a reason that they've been made this way by this unfair system that has created this wealth and income disparity that keeps creating more poverty? Who could blame the communists and the socialists for thinking the answer is just to take from the haves to give to the have-nots? Who can blame them for thinking that? I don't blame them. I say they make a valid point. And then I explain that, yeah, I'm totally against crony capitalism. As a capitalist, a good capitalist, an honest capitalist that believes in supply and demand capitalism, free market capitalism, that is able to define true capitalism, what the progress is under true capitalism, this rising tide of prosperity across the board. I could explain the whys and wherefores, because as a civilization, a society, we find easier and easier ways to create not only the things we want, but the things we need. So, you know, this is the way it works, is that progress is defined as X, not as Y. Don't believe the hype. Don't believe the bull. Don't believe how you've been trained to believe. Believe what I'm showing you the evidence for. I'm giving you the why and wherefore. I'm making it so a child can understand why your currency is supposed to go up in worth and not down, as you find easier and easier methods to produce not only the things you need, but the things you want. So your burden should not go up. There's no difference than if your taxes were going up. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. How can people sit there and say how bad taxes are because it's the government doing it, but not telling you how bad it is that the private sector is raising your taxes? okay, and destroying the worth of your currency. It's the same thing. The effect is identical. So why wouldn't it be the case? It is the case. And so here we are, folks. And it's a very, very, very sketchy time. The best of times, the worst of times. And we've got to get together as one big family. We've got to give a crap. That is loving. So the most important thing that we can do is to try to love and understand one another. Give one another respect. Give those same things that we want. Treat others the way you want to be treated. You like to be treated with sensitivity and respect? We've got to be careful the way we talk to people, because the words are like a sword, like the spark, like that ignites a forest. So what a large forest is set afire by such a small spark, as a metaphor. Our words are very important. They can either harm or they can heal. They can either bring people to our way of thinking, or they can repel people from our way of thinking. And the most important thing is that we do our honest best by consulting with the Spirit of Truth about how to convey these things to people to be effective. Because at the end of the day, that's it. You're trying to win the communists to your capitalist way of thinking, right? And, the communists, you're trying to win the capitalists to your way of thinking. Well, then have a conversation. Keep cool heads and debate this thing, okay, and work it out. And just be honest. You don't have to have a great IQ. You don't have to be particularly intellectual. But you've just got to just be honest and be ready to say, look, you make a good point, and I will consider that. Now here, consider this point I'm making. So we're at a precarious time in history, and the worm is going to turn, and not all the combined forces by and for darkness are going to be able to stop this thing from happening. It's going to happen. It's going to happen on God's time and terms, though. That's what's written. Jesus said, look, I don't know when exactly this end of the age, the exact moment is going to take place, but it's going to happen like a twinkling of an eye. It's going to come like a thief in the night for a lot of people. Not because God is trying to catch us with our pants down. He wants us ready. But he knows what's going to happen. I mean, God is God, and he knows that a lot of people are going to love their lives in this world. They're going to be distracted with this and that, the next thing, and they're going to be unready. They're like the Laodiceans. They're well heeled. They're comfortable. So there's still this critical mass of establishmentarians that has to be maintained by the establishment in order to keep this ball rolling, to keep this trajectory going of this ever-growing wealth disparity, ever-increasing poverty, and just try to make people accept it and say, well, it's just the way it has to be. I mean, we don't know. We're overwhelmed. The problems just have to get worse. We can't seem to fix them. Who's going to pay to fix them? All this nonsense. They're selling. They're pushing confusion. They want to convolute stuff. They're pushing Babylon. They're pushing ignorance. And they want people to just revel in it. Just understand ignorance is bliss. That's where your defenses are. Don't listen to anybody trying to tell you otherwise. Just believe what you believe. Go with the flow. Go with the grain. Go along to get along. This is the easy way out. Conform, comply, capitulate, acquiesce to the current establishment. Accept this as reality. And don't try to change it. But it's going to change. And there's nothing that the evil people can do to stop it. Because the minions are going to start jumping ship. The unwitting ones are going to say, you know what, I'm starting to understand this guy speaks truth. I mean, he points out stuff nobody's pointing out. The way I'm always pointing out, look, if you don't care if he's born with a silver spoon in his mouth, or she is born with a silver spoon in his mouth, or I was born with a silver spoon in my mouth, or you were born with a silver spoon in your mouth, then by extension, who cares if we're all born with a silver spoon in their mouth? If that's the way God says it should be. Do you understand? So it doesn't seem so wild-eyed, far out, and pipe dreaming. Not so radical anymore, is it? Okay? And that's what I'm trying to convey, is that the reason people think a guy like me is radical, when I embrace both sides of this thing, I say, yes, I'll take the best of the liberal philosophy, and I will take the best of the conservative philosophy, and here's what you get. You still get progress. You still get ever-increasing worth of your currency through an ever-declining cost of living. That means ever-declining taxation, ever-declining burden. That's the direction we're supposed to go. So an ever-lowering work week, because there's so many people doing unproductive jobs now. If we were all doing productive jobs, there'd hardly be any work for anybody out there. and we could have an abundance of everything. So there'd be prosperity all around the world. We have vacant houses and all this. Sounds so radical. Sounds so, whoo, this guy's out there, man. But really, I'm logical. I'm ready to do the math with you. I'll tell you, I'm a fiscal conservative. As liberal as it sounds, I'm telling you, no, it's going to make your taxes go down. I'm saying, let's get rid of Section 8 housing. And you say, oh, he's incompassionate. Now he's just being some right-wing nutcase, conservative freak, fascist. And I say, oh, really? Does it sound, right-wing, conservative, fascist to tell you that I think that they should just solve the problem by buying people houses? And they, oh, no, you're a radical liberal now. You understand? You're a commie. You're a socialist. So I get it from both sides of the spectrum here, from unthinking, brute beast type people out there. And I'm sick and tired of it. I want everybody to share the cross with me, because I'm bearing the cross from the ultra-conservatives. I'm bearing the cross from the ultra-liberals and the entire spectrum therein. They all think, oh, he's just trying to be different. He's virtue signaling, or, I'm this or that. No. I'm on everybody's side because I see that my welfare is entwined in your welfare. I get that. That's spelled out in Scripture. Jesus said that. God says that in the Bible. It's just all the faiths say the same thing. Okay? We are inextricably interconnected as human beings, and we feel the pain or the joy of our fellow human beings through osmosis. Because of this inextricable interconnectivity, this default that God put in us, this fail-safe that God put in us, our conscience, these invisible qualities that we value, the soul, the integrity, the honor. I mean, ask anybody, what would you give your soul? I want to buy your soul from you so that you'll do anything I tell you to do. You'll commit murder and you just forget conscience. There's going to be no implications, no ramifications from abusing and neglecting and just, punching your conscience in the face. Okay, forget it. So give me your soul. How much money? You see, it's about money, right? Things of this world, the temporal things. And so a lot of people would. They'd be glad to sell their soul for money. But people in their right mind wouldn't. But people in their right mind come on both sides of the spectrum. They're coming from the left, from the right, the communists, socialists, conservatives, capitalists. So let's just be honest, folks. That's all I'm saying is let's, and but I keep on saying this honest thing. I feel like, I'm suggesting that I'm always honest. Look, there's what's called, white lies and little, what's the other? I guess it would have to be black lie, right? But, let all men be called liars, but God can't lie. And we all are liars to some degree. I'm not going to sit here all pompous and sanctimonious and tell you that I've never lied or that I wouldn't lie. I mean, even in the Bible, there's talk about these spies that were sent out there. What's a spy? A spy is a liar, right? So, I mean, there's sometimes when God even would condone a little white lie, okay? When, he knows that what's happening here is that Satan wants us all compromised. He wants us all to be like him, made in the image and likeness. So make us all liars. Make us so, in order for people to survive, they got to lie. A lot of people have pointed this out about the IRS and all the regulation, the stacks of, rules they have. I mean, anybody, if you're off by a nickel, then literally, okay, you could be indicted on that nickel that you were off in your tax estimation. I mean, there's no difference between a nickel and $10 billion as far as the IRS is concerned and their rules and regulations. So, I'm just throwing that out there as an example of how there's little white lies, or maybe people say, oh, it would drive me nuts to keep that, careful of records. Whatever the case is, whatever excuse people have, the point is that we're all infected, we're all affected by this invented paradigm, this unreality that's shoved down our throat, foisted upon us from birth. We're all told, no, you got a cost of living. You don't have a choice. You're born enslaved, and people don't know that they're enslaved. You're not free as long as you got a cost of living. You've got taxes. You're not born free. Okay, that's end of the story right there. And it's measured by dollars, Federal Reserve notes, money, whatever form it takes. If it's money, it's money. digital or otherwise. But you've got to figure out how you've got a nut to crack. Okay, and they keep making that nut harder and harder and harder. That's retrogression. That's regression. Okay, that's anti-progress. That's the opposite of progress. That's the direction society's been going for a long time. And earlier I was pointing out this domestic civil war we've been having since the coup, the money printing coup of the assassination of JFK. And then what's the next big thing? Oh, Nixon opens trade with China as if that's so great. How has that helped us really in the long run in the scheme of things? Cheaper crap? Who cares? Like Americans ever had a problem making crap, cheap crap. Okay? We could have done that fine. We didn't need the Chinese. That was to benefit them more, that we're such, nice guys. We're egalitarians. We're Americans. We're going to share our prosperity with China. Maybe, help them out, their human rights violations. Be nicer.